Welcome to Buckets. This is Action Network's WNBA betting podcast presented by BetMGM. Not only is this our Tuesday Best Bets episode, but it's a very, very special episode because this is our Commissioner's Cup special. So the Liberty are taking on the Lynx on Tuesday at 8 o'clock Eastern in New York. Plus, we have the debut of Joe Delara here on Buckets WNBA. You know him from the NBA version of Buckets here on Action Network and some of our other programs like Action Island. Joe, welcome to the show.
Hey, it's a pleasure to be here. What a day to start. This is going to be a really exciting game. I'm pretty excited for it. It's got two of the best teams in the WNBA. So what a better way to start here than the Commissioner's Cup.
I know. We had to get you on board here since I saw you hit a few Liberty-related props over the weekend. But we are also joined by one of our regulars, Jim Turvey. So we got the J's, we got the W. It's going to be a good time. All right, before we get into the game itself and your best bets, just want to set the stage a little bit. If you're not familiar with the Commissioner's Cup, this is something that the players will benefit greatly from winning. There's a $500,000 prize pool. So this is something that the players really want. And that if you look at the roster, you're looking at about a $46,000 or so, $47,000 or so bonus per player if you win this. And we did a Commissioner's Cup special a season ago, Jim and I. So that's a big reason why I had to have Jim back, because he cleaned up on that one. When the Liberty, of course, beat the Aces. And Jim, what are your memories from that episode?
That was a very fun one. That was one where they had not quite pieced together that Jonquel Jones, who was on a minutes restriction in a game of this, kind of importance, was likely to have her minutes raised. She was playing great basketball. They opened her MVP odds at 34-1 plus 3,400. Jumped on that. That was the best bet for the episode. She had an awesome game. The Liberty won, and she took home MVP. That was one of my favorite bets of the year last year. So I'm definitely excited to be back. I've got one that it's not quite as long and it hasn't hit yet, so it can't be my favorite bet since it hasn't hit. But I really like a little bit of a semi-long shot here. So that's a little bit of a tease. But I'm excited. I'm excited for this game in general. Just like Joe said, two of the best teams in the W. I think really fun styles of play as well. So I think this should be a great one.
Yeah, I think a lot of listeners, that's one of their favorite moments in Buckets WNBA history. So I'll ask for your best bets to start, and then we'll just talk through the matchup, from a big picture perspective. But Jim, what are the best bets that you have for the Commissioner's Cup?
Yeah, so I'm going to go with the under in the game. Right now it's 162.5. We'll talk through a little bit of how to approach that and what key numbers are there. And then the one I just teased, my favorite, mid-long shot here, Bridget Carlton to lead the game in threes plus 1,500.
Very nice. Bridget Carlton of the Minnesota Lynx. And then, Joe, what are your favorite bets here off the top?
So the only way to do this is to have some plus odds, plays here. So I like Jonquel Jones over 24.5 points plus rebounds. And I'm also going to be taking an alt rebounds line of 13 plus at plus 600. And then I also like Breanna Stewart over 1.5 threes at plus 195 or so.
Ooh, very nice, very nice. Okay, so before we get into this, let me just remind everybody. So the Lynx, they're the representative from the West here in this matchup. The Liberty have now gained sole possession of first place in the WNBA as a whole. It's their best start in franchise history. The Liberty have earned home court advantage, but they're not exactly playing at home. They are playing in New York, but it's at UBS Arena in Belmont Park, New York. If you're not familiar with the area, it's about a 15-minute drive from Barclays Center in Brooklyn, where they normally play. I mapped it out via public transit. It doesn't look like a good time. It's like an hour and a half, depending on subways, trains, and whatnot. So while I do think there's going to be a home court advantage here, I don't think it's going to be the typical vibes that you get from being at Barclays Center in Brooklyn, which is arguably the nicest arena in the WNBA. The Liberty, though, are favored by 5.5. And This is I think this is a tough one to predict in terms of side. The Liberty have some injury issues that are also going to come into play when we talk about props, but the latest is that Benaja Laney, Hamilton, and Courtney Vandersloot are questionable. Laney has had a right knee issue. She's missed the last 3 games. And then Courtney Vandersloot's mother passed away, Jan Vandersloot. So rest in peace. Thoughts with Courtney. But she's still working her way back. She's missed the last 8 games. And so she's working her way back conditioning wise. But Jim, what were your thoughts initially on the spread?
Yeah, the side that catches my eye is definitely the Lynx. And I'll say this, I even debated having Lynx side as one of my best bets, but I think the way to do this is to wait on it. You mentioned Benaja Laney Hamilton and Courtney Vandersloot both being questionable still. If you look at the books, they're hanging player props for Laney, but not for Vandersloot. If I like theoretically would have just kind of used logic, I would have assumed that Vandersloot was the more likely to play, but maybe on a minutes restriction. Laney's off a knee injury. She's missed the last 3 games. It's kind of a quick turnaround. This is a big game, obviously. Commissioner's Cup final. Got that added extra, money incentive, but there's also, there's a trophy. There's the players want to play for this. So I'm thinking it's, both being questionable right now, it's only going to move. The spread's only going to move towards New York if those players play. If they're ruled out, then maybe it does shrink to the point where I don't want to be on the Lynx side. But if both play and it moves to, something like Liberty -7.5, that's going to be something where I'm going to definitely be interested by the Lynx side of things. But considering that's the side I'm on and the fact that I'm thinking it's likely in a big game that they're going to, go if they can, I want to wait, but I'm going to be on the Lynx side of things, I think.
So, Joe, here's what I've been toying with. The Liberty have been rolling. They're sharing the ball really well. Jonquel Jones has been playing amazing. Sabrina Ionescu, has really like found her stride. She is dishing the ball like no other. In fact, she's had at least 8 assists in the last 6 games. And so I wonder, even if Vandersloot is able to go, even if Laney, well, actually, I think they're a bit of a different case. Laney Hamilton, I think if she's going, they're utilizing her. She's typically like, their best on-ball defender. Sloot, I just wonder about sort of reintroducing somebody back into the fold that has been out for some time when the Libs have been rolling.
Yeah, I mean, I think that the big thing, right, is going to be how it maybe affects the line here, because I'm with Jim. I think that Minnesota is the side. Even if we look at this, obviously, it's early in the season, so some of these numbers have to play out. And, when we look at the advanced metrics, it's not the Liberty that have the best net rating in the W. It's the Minnesota Lynx. The Lynx have a plus 12.9 net rating. Obviously, the Liberty's is good. It's plus 12.5. But like when we look at this, it's like, are we really going to say not only is home court, worth 5.5 points? If these players come back and they come back into the fold, are we going to start seeing like 6.5s? Are we going to see a 7? And, maybe that's an opportunity then where we don't know how exactly they're going to be incorporated. And even if they are incorporated heavily, not only does that like obviously affect the prop market, but it affects like the team chemistry. It affects some of the rotations that they're doing. It affects so many different things in like, this is essentially a playoff game, like, especially with the money. Right. And not to make like comparisons, obviously, to the NBA, but the way the salaries are in the W, this is like a really significant prize. Like, this is not like a throw in, like, oh, like this is good for the guys late, like lower on the bench. Like, this is significant for everybody. Like, everybody's going to be really, really going for it, I think. And, trying to incorporate a bunch of different players, not just one, but multiple players, especially Vandersloot, who is pretty ball dominant in the fact that she is a guard, like she is a lead guard, she is a distributor. How does that affect Sabrina? How does that affect Brianna? Like, how does that affect the whole team? I can only think of this as a buy opportunity regardless of what the injury report says. But like, I think that right now it makes more sense to wait, like Jim said, see if these players are ruled in, buy in on the Lynx if this goes up. And honestly, if they're out, then it's like, all right, like, I don't think this is going to come down to 5, 4, 4.5. Like, I think that this is still an opportunity where we can wait, see what the status is, and be able to get a good number on Minnesota regardless.
To your point, about how well Minnesota has been playing. So they are 13-3 straight up. They have won 6 in a row. They're 12-4 against the spread. So just a little tidbit there. You know, they tend to win outright the games that they're covering. The last time out, just FYI, they played Saturday, beat Phoenix, which is a nice win, 73-60. Nafisa Collier had 23 points, 14 rebounds. Now the Liberty are 15-3 straight up, only 7-11 against the spread. Now they've had an easier schedule of late, not in terms of volume. They've played a lot of games in a short time, but they haven't played a super tough opponent. So they beat Atlanta Sunday, 96-75. That was on the second night of it back-to-back. They were home the day before, beat LA, then went on the road. So Liberty, a little bit less rest technically, obviously not having to travel like Minnesota is. Also of note, these two teams played on May 25th, and this was an upset by the Lynx. They won 84-67. They were 7-point dogs, but this was a strange game for Jonquel Jones. She only had 4 points, 5 fouls in 28 minutes. I think the foul trouble just really wreaked havoc on her. Stewie had 20 and 11, Nafisa 15 and 12. So I am wondering if this could be a bit of a Jonquel Jones revenge game. And so that said, that kind of leads me to you, Joe, and your pick on JJ. Let's talk about it.
Yeah, so I mean, I like the 24.5 PR, and I like the rebounds ladder instead of like, number one, the offerings. We just don't have as many offerings, right? So like we kind of have to try to pick a stat that we think that she could really go higher in. I like the 24.5 PR because she's gone over in 11 of 18 this season. And obviously the game against the Lynx, she had the 5 fouls. She did play 27 minutes, but she just, I think it was hard for her to get into a rhythm. Last playoffs though, she hit this line, the 24.5 PR, in 70% of the games and averaged 28.6 points plus rebounds. So I think that there's definitely some additional upside here. She was excellent. Obviously, Jim knows, you guys all know, last year in the Commissioner's Cup, winning the MVP was 16 and 15. So I like the rebounding upside. When we look at the matchup, the reason I like this as well is when these two teams played back in May, the Lynx opened the game in a zone, and I think that made it a little bit more difficult for Brianna. I think it made it a little bit more difficult for Sab, and I think this is an opportunity, though, if they do that again, where Jonquel can maybe get some offensive rebounds, can kind of figure that out, right? After that initial opening, Minnesota switched their coverage and they started covering a little bit more man-to-man, woman to woman. And they did, and they put Nafisa Collier on Brianna Stewart. And I think that is going to create more offensive rebound opportunities for Jonquel. Minnesota, over the course of this entire season, they're allowing the second most opponent rebounds per game, and they're allowing the most opponent offensive rebounds per game. This is a spot where I like the PR combo. Jim and I talked about this a little bit off air, but if Jonquel, if they're stopping Brianna and they're stopping maybe Sabrina, those are opportunities for Jonquel to grab offensive rebounds and then get those easy putbacks to add to the point total. So that's why I like both. Obviously, Minnesota allows a lot of rebounds just overall. I think in part because the defense has been pretty, it's been nails. So you're getting a couple more opportunities there to get offensive rebounds just because of missed shots. But at the end of the day, all we're looking for those rebound opportunities. And that's something that I think Jonquel Jones can really take advantage of. So I like the over the points and the rebounds, and I like the rebound ladder as the alt, specifically because even if she's not necessarily the biggest scorer, I think that the rebounding opportunities are going to be plentiful.
Absolutely. Oh, I mean, we love it. We are going to wrap up this episode a bit later, talking MVP, and we'll see, who you guys might like for Commish Cup MVP this time. But we already know, as you said, JJ's been both a Commish Cup MVP. She's been a league MVP. And like I said, I think she's going to want a little bit of revenge after last game. Something to keep in mind too, I don't think this is going to affect her too much, but Dorka Juhas did not play in that last meeting. But I love Dorka. She's great, but that matchup doesn't necessarily scare me in terms of, JJ having another big body down there. All right. So that is one of the best bets from Joe. Jim, you want to talk about the under?
Yeah, for sure. So, rebounds and unders kind of go hand in hand. So theoretically, if we're in a game with a lot of missed shots here, that actually bodes pretty well for Joe's rebounding props. But to me, this I'm a little surprised this number's taking some over money right now, because when I look at this game, it screams under me for several reasons here. For one, the last time they matched up, this was a pretty slow paced game. They played at a pace that was about equivalent to what the Sun play on average, which is the slowest pace in the WNBA. These are two teams that are relatively slow paced, but they're also, more importantly, second and third best defenses. And the Lynx defense in particular is really doing well right now. You referenced their most recent win over the Mercury. They held Phoenix to 60 points. That's a pretty high scoring offense. Before that, it was the Atlanta Dream. They held to 55. But in general, this defense just doesn't really give up points. If we use the number right now of 162.5, and we say the Liberty are favored by 5.5 or so, that brings their projected team total into about the mid 80s, right? The Lynx have allowed exactly one team to reach the mid 80s in regulation this season. The highest total they've allowed in regulation was 86 to the Aces. Other than that, it was 81 against the Mercury. Now, they did allow 93 to the Storm. That was in double overtime. They allowed 83 to the Sun. That was in overtime. But this Lynx defense has really just done an outstanding job all season. Now, there is a little bit of, potential shooting regression that their defense is facing. And this is going to be, in the Liberty, one of the best offenses they face. But then you add in the fact that these playoff type atmospheres, typically we see things slow down a little bit. We see shooters get a little bit tight.
Yeah.
I always screams unders to me in general. One factor that I think actually could be a pretty big thing here. You mentioned that it's a home. I'm putting that in quotes for people not able to watch the video. Home game for the Liberty. This is going to be a new arena for these teams, even for the Liberty. This is going to be when we saw in the in-season tournament when teams were having those funky new courts, it was really throwing people off. Teams weren't shooting all that well. It's also the two lowest opponent free throw rate teams. These teams don't really foul. Usually you get a little bit of a, more of a let them play type atmosphere in these big games. So to me, basically, everything checks off leaning towards the under in this. So that kind of goes with some of the player prop angles that I actually more that I was scared of. To be honest, I was looking for a few overs here or there. It came around, but by the end, I was looking to a few unders or just kind of staying away from the kind of, direct, minus 110 either side player props. But for the game as a whole, everything here is screaming under to me.
It's so interesting. So I have been to UBS Arena. Like I said, it's nice. I like it. Different vibe. Brooklyn's so chill. Like it's just, you feel like cool walking into Barclays Center. UBS Arena is just it's actually a hockey arena. It's where the New York Islanders play. I just did a quick Google to see how many people it fits. I saw over 18,000. So actually a touch bigger than Barclays. I don't know if it's going to be a sellout just because of the location and the the usual fan base. I know they are busing some folks out there. I personally, I feel bad, but I was like, I don't know. I'm coming from Jersey. I don't know if I'm going to get out there. So, the vibes could be different. And also, just getting used to that shooter's touch that, for the Liberty players, it's just not their usual arena. So I'm totally with you there. All right, let's move on to Joe, your Breanna Stewart prop.
Yeah, so this is honestly more of a bet on opportunity. And one of the things that I noticed, looking at some of the game logs, and obviously Minnesota has gone through a ton of different changes, whether it's personnel, scheme, coaching, whatever, right? But over the past couple of seasons, Breanna, she's taking a ton of threes against Minnesota. And in this season, in the one matchup, she was 1 for 8 from 3, which obviously isn't good. And I know that some of the concerns with her have been the shooting is just not really there this year. But she's still being pretty productive. She's still being she's still been excellent overall. But I think that the opportunity here at that number at basically 2-1 odds to me is great. I think that one of the things that Minnesota does is they have pretty good interior presence, and the defense is great. I think that being able to stretch the floor, trying to spread the floor out, try to open a couple things up is something that she's going to be able to do. She's going to be given the opportunity to do. So at the number at the plus 195 for her to make 2, even though I know she's shooting terribly. But
A
looking
little
at what
better as of late. A little better as of late.
Yeah, so and I think that there's like a little bit of opportunity here. The numbers to me is too long given the matchup, given the personnel. So for her to make 2 threes at plus 195, I definitely want a piece of that.
Can I hop in really quick? I just
Yeah,
want to
please.
shout out Robert Mummery had a really interesting article for Her Hoop Stats looking at this kind of now extended shooting streak from Brianna Stewart. It's by far the worst of her career. And if it stretches back to the playoffs, and it actually stretches back to September of last year. And he did like
Yeah.
a really, if you love if you're kind of a numbers geek, go find this article because he did like stuff that, I even kind of, it like makes me a little dizzy, but he's talking about like the binomial
Binomial
probability.
distribution, yeah.
Yeah, and I was like, whoa, this is crazy. But basically what he did is he looked at this extended streak of struggling from Brianna Stewart and found that like there was like a less than 0.5% chance that this was just luck. But like you can't rule it out entirely. But he does think that, theoretically it might be that she's getting a little bit worse at shooting. But what was really confusing, he also looked at her mid-range, like deep mid-range free throws, and nothing else suggests that she should be a worse shooter. So it was kind of a really interesting, it didn't have a set conclusion of yes, she's a worse shooter now, or yes, this is only bad luck. So I do think that it leaves up in the air. Like, is this just real? It could just be a really fluky bad stretch. It's just kind of crazy to see how far back it has stretched now with her and her shooting struggles.
100%. And actually, that was one of the things that I like picked up on because you sent me the article earlier and I took a skim through it. But one of the things that I thought was interesting was that really over the last 2 seasons, her 3-point attempts she's going 3 for 9, 1 for 6, 6 for 8, 1 for 8 against Minnesota. And obviously, like, there's changes, things are different year to year, but those attempts are so much higher really than like every other team that she plays against that to me, I think that it's worth like at 2-1, even if you want to play a half a unit on it or you want to try to just win 1 unit, I think that that's okay. But I bet it, I like it. I think that there's plenty of opportunity here, even with like a lower shooting percentage, just because of the volume.
I agree. And part of why I said before that it's been a little bit better as of late, like there was a bit of a storyline here, particularly with her 3-point shooting. Mm-hmm. And then when they played Phoenix a few games ago, she went 4 of 4 from deep. And then people were like, oh, she's back, right? And then the last 3 games, she's made at least 1 3 in all 3. She made 3 in the second meeting with LA, and she took 9 that game. Now, again, it's not the same defensive caliber, but to your point, she is not afraid to shoot. Like her and Jonquel, being bigs that can stretch the floor, they're such an asset to New York, and they're a big part of what Sandy Brondello wants to do. So I agree. The volume is there. And I think she, like her making 2 is not like a crazy phenomenon. All right. So that's Brianna Stewart. Now, Jim, you mentioned one other best bet, and this was Bridget Carlton to lead the game in threes. And this is more of a long shot at plus 1,500 or so. So tell us about that.
Yeah, I'm kind of all over Bridget Carlton. Actually, so that's my favorite bet is to lead the game in threes. But I also like they have some books out there have these like player performance doubles. I was actually going to shout out with Joe's Jonquel, but I'm going to get distracted for 1 second here. But I think that a really good look for this potentially is if you like the Jonquel Jones bet as well, and you're on the Liberty, there's a Jonquel Jones to get 10 rebounds and the Liberty to win at plus 235. I think those are really closely correlated. If Jonquel is rebounding and doing well, I think that's a pretty good sign for the Liberty. So I really like that under that player/team performance result.
Can I add a nugget about that too?
Yeah.
New York is 17-0 in regular season games when JJ has a double-double. So.
Well, now I like it even more.
There's that.
Yeah. So continue.
I love that. That you had that on the spot. That was impressive.
Well, I have some, I fancy myself a professional. I have some notes written down. And also, if you recall, Jim, do you remember back in the day? But when I say back in the day, I mean last postseason, we did an episode where we crushed it, and I brought up JJ double-double because at the time in the postseason, she was just churning out double-doubles, and every time she had a double-double, the Liberty won. Yeah. So it was hearkening me back to them. But
I love
proceed.
that. So another one of those player performance and result type bets is you can bet Bridget Carleton to score 12 points and Minnesota to win at plus 900, considering I'm leaning towards the Lynx side of things and I'm loving Carleton. That's one I really like. And then the top rung in the ladder, of course, we have if the future Jays are on this podcast, we got to go to the top top of the escalator, top of the ladder. Whatever. Brandon's gonna get upset if he hears he's gonna like pop into the Zoom and start yelling. MVP at plus 2,900 for Bridget Carleton. So let me talk through why I like Bridget so much. So cool. I have her projected for the third most threes in this game anyways. And she's on an absolute heater right now. So in her last 7 games, she's actually hit 58.8% of her shots. And one thing I've noticed, it's absolutely unbelievable. Cheryl Reeve has really leaned in this season because this Lynx team is kind of like, we're just going to like do all the good stuff. And we've got a lot of like good players, but not like Fee is like a top 3 player. But outside of that, it's a lot of like, I'll contribute tonight, you contribute tomorrow. You know, we kind of ride the hot hand. So her minutes have actually raised as a result as well. So she's been playing over 31, almost 32 minutes a game these last 7 games. That's up from around 27 that she was at before that. So as she's been shooting better, she's gaining more trust, and Cheryl Reeve has really been putting her out there a lot. But what I think is most interesting about this stat, so I mentioned this is a 15-1 bet. Bridget Carleton, over this 7-game streak, she has led the whole game in threes 4 of those last 7 games. Now, past performance does not equal future performance, but something that has literally happened 4 of the last 7 games she has played, we can get a 15-1 at. Now, you wouldn't project a player to go forward shooting almost 60% from 3, but also you don't want to overthink this and be like, you know, she's going to miss them all. There's a happy medium. She is shooting well right now, and she is getting minutes and touches and attempts as a result. To get her at 15-1 to lead the game in threes, I think it's mispriced even for the season as a whole, but especially with how she's playing right now. Yeah. There's also the fact that the Lynx really do well limiting opponent threes. I think Joe mentioned it in passing, but they give up the fewest threes per game. So that's going to make things tougher on the Liberty side of things. You know, Sabrina's obviously going to be the favorite on this one, but a stat that is as variant in a single game as 3-pointers made. I love this long shot here. Carleton, 15-1. That's definitely my favorite bet. We'll sprinkle her all sorts of different ways. But to lead the game in threes at plus 1,500 is my favorite bet for the whole game. And my favorite bet in a while. I really love this one.
I have to say, earlier today, I was scrolling X and I saw you post something about, I'm going to be giving out my favorite bet on Buckets WNBA. And I was like, oh my God, what is it going to be? And this is it. Also to that end, before you even told me about this, I was peeping Bridget Carleton. You can get her to score 10 plus points, plus 164. I mean, it's not as like, you know, sexy and whatever, but just FYI, she scored 4 points in the last game, but had double-digit points in 4 straight games prior to that. She also scored 14 against New York in the earlier matchup this season. So, and like, that's not a scary number. So that's something I'm considering. Now,
very good. I love it.
Good.
I'm like filling with the bars in the background when she's taking. Jim, you think she's gonna take 4 threes?
Yeah, definitely.
When she's taken 4 threes this season, she's 8 for 10 on at least her baseline of over 1.5 at plus 105.
Yeah.
So look at this.
You know,
I love this. Joe is like getting his numbers out. Like we're all like doing math over here. So I want to use this as an opportunity to sort of transition into the Cup MVP odds. Now, Jim, give me the case for Carleton MVP. What does that look like?
I really think it's a game where I'm on the under. It could be gross. It could be like a 75-70 final, something like that. Carleton, I'm like, she leads the game in threes. That's going to be, you know, maybe 4 threes, maybe a couple of her drives to the basket. We're looking at like 16 points in a game that could be really grimy. I do wish it was a little longer. It's why it's not my favorite of the bet. I think last year when that 3,400 came through, maybe got a little spooked. There was no real long shots to be found this year. Carleton's my favorite of the MVP bets, but it's not my favorite of the ways to play Carleton. I'll say that.
Copy that. And then Joe, I'm just curious, even if you're not betting it, any leans in the MVP market?
This is tough because I feel like the way that I've capped it, the players that I feel most confident in terms of my player props have been on the Liberty side, but I lean the Lynx. So
Yes.
for me, it's a little bit more of a pass. I think I would
Okay.
just I think I'm okay, just maybe tailing Jim, maybe tailing you, and maybe just grabbing the Lynx. And like I think the money line is honestly kind of juicy too. Like I'm like fine either way.
Yeah.
I just am pretty comfortable backing the Lynx in this spot.
Fair enough. And just so listeners are aware, the shortest odds are on Nafisa Collier and Brianna Stewart at around plus 280 right now. Then you have Sabrina Ionescu plus 440, JJ plus 460 or so. Then Kayla McBride plus 700. And she's been another one that's been, I think she's leading the league in 3-pointers made as well. So something to consider there. Were there any other picks from each of you that I'm missing?
The only
No,
thing
I,
I
I just
wanted
would say, Maria, based on what you said with the MVP and like what the lines are, like I if you like Minnesota, I like really wouldn't bet on Fee to win MVP. Like I don't think that there's enough of like a delta between the money line, which is like plus 185, plus 190, and plus 230 or so, like 240. I don't think that there's enough there. Just based on some of the variability that like could happen, and plus we want Jim's MVP bet to hit. So but like I just would caution that. I don't
Okay.
think that I don't think that that's worth betting.
I do
Sound
think
advice.
it just in
Go
these
ahead.
single games that I agree with Joe that there's so much crazy things. That's why the 3,400 was so tempting last year. A single game, it's so hard to, the most likely is going to be the favorite, but the spread of the variance is not evenly accounted for with these odds.
Yeah.
One other note on Nafisa, just FYI, I'm not 100% sure if I'm going to bet this, but I did find myself wondering what her odds were to record a double-double because, she's fourth in the league in scoring at 21 a game and, fourth in the league in rebounding, around 10 a game. And, like I said, she did have 15 and 12 in this last meeting, but remember too that was an off game for Jonquel Jones. But if you're interested, she's had 9 double-doubles this season. She's around plus 100 to get a double-double. Also, I just want to mention too, so 2023, New York won the season series 2-1. The Lynx beat New York back in July, and then New York won very handily both times in August. All right, there's one other thing I got to mention before we go. Hold on, Jim. You looked like you were going to say something else. What is it?
Oh, yeah. Wait, can I have one thing before your one thing?
Yes, go ahead.
Yours sounds like it's going to wrap better. Mine was I just wanted to walk through a couple of player props that I had highlighted, but we didn't get the official news on Laney or Sloot. But these are potential plays if we get news on either of those. One of them is if Laney plays, I might be looking at Sabrina Ionescu's points under. So the last 3 games, she's playing outstanding. The last 3 games, she's been in like the mid to high 20s. She had 31 one game. But I don't think it's a coincidence that they have come when Laney has been out and she can take on a bigger amount of usage. Now, again, if Laney plays, I think you and I agree that she's the more likely. If she plays, it's not going to be on like a partial minutes limit like we might see from Sloot. I think if she plays, she plays. And I do think that will eat into Sabrina's usage in a game where I'm looking towards unders on the player prop side of things anyways. That's one that popped to me as a possible one. In terms of her assists, there's also a huge gap with what she's been able to do with and without Sloot on the court. A little bit more hesitant on that one just because Sloot we do think might have a minutes restriction. But those are 2 that popped to me. And I'll say final one on these is if you're looking the JJ rebounds that Joe gave out, I like that even more if Laney is out. If Laney plays, that's another person who's in there grabbing rebounds. But if not, I do really like that JJ 10 rebounds in New York to win if you're looking to be on the New York side of things.
Well, as I mentioned earlier, the fact that Sab has had at least 8 dimes in the last 6 games, super correlated to, whether or not Sloot plays. But if Sloot is definitely out, I mean, it's a little tempting. Sab 8+ assists is plus 205. It's pretty juiced for her to get 6+. It's at minus 190. So something to consider there. And then also take a little page out of Joe Delara's book, because I saw you, Joe, during the the NBA Finals, betting all your first quarter points.
Yes.
So I saw that. Again, I think this is really going to depend on whether or not those other two players are in, because this is based very much on what the Liberty have done lately. But Sab over 7.5 first quarter points, -102. Not sure about that, but I can tell you that she leads the W in double digit scoring first quarters. She has 5 double-digit scoring first quarter. She had 12 points in the first quarter in the last game.
She smacks in the first quarter. She's averaging 7.9 points per game in the first quarter. Depending on if you can get this at 5.5. If it's 5.5, she's hit this in 15 of 18 games this season. If you get the 6.5, 11
he's
of 18.
ready to give the stats. So. I love it.
I don't even have your notes.
I know. We're not even looking at the same notes. But I just love that I've kind of, because I've followed you guys for so long, I've kind of like learned how your brain works. And now I'm like finding those little edges. So that is another possibility to consider. And before I said one more thing, this was the one more thing that I was talking about. I just have to give a quick shout out to our producer, David Payne, because in addition to your bomb MVP pick hitting in the Commish Cup last year, Jim, I casually was like, listen, Brianna Stewart makes a lot of first baskets. And I didn't even really have I didn't have any specific numbers to back it. I just said kind of in passing, I was like, look, I watch a lot of Liberty games and a lot of times she gets the ball off the tip. And so David's messaging me via Slack earlier today, and he's giving me actual numbers of okay, in 18 games that Minnesota has had this season, they've scored the first basket 9 times, so 50%. Of those 9, Collier got 5 of them. New York also 10 of their 20 games, they've gotten the first basket. Of those 10, Stewie 5 times, Jones 3 times. I'm not going to go too crazy about it. I'll just say this: the notion still stands, and that JJ is usually the one jumping up the ball. And it's absolutely plan A for the Liberty for her to tip the ball over to Stewie. Stewie's huge, has the length, is usually able to get the ball and kind of go right to the hole. So that's something they like to do. Let me pull just so I have the reference. Stewie plus 550 for the first basket. And you can also do first team basket scorer, Stewie plus 310. So I just wanted to throw that in as an ode to our great producer, David Payne. But otherwise, I feel like, dang, we've gone 38 minutes talking about this one game, but I really feel like we hit every angle. And Jim Turvey, Joe Delara, really appreciate you hopping on for this special Commissioner's Cup episode. So thank you guys.
It was a lot of fun.
Yeah, this was a blast.
I know it was. I know. And thanks everybody for listening to Buckets presented by BetMGM. We will be back Friday with more best bets. Enjoy the Commissioner's Cup. We'll see you next time. Let's get buckets.